Hey everyone, this is Nick, and I don't have an intro, so this week we have a big malware making its way onto the Snap Store and a subsequent reaction from Canonical to try and deal with that. We've got a planned API for handling all your computer's RGB on Linux, and we have the Warp terminal coming to Linux, although it is not open source. Oh, and we also have some new features finally coming to Firefox. We have more work being planned on HDR, we have some new NVIDIA drivers, and we have this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Tuxedo. They provide Linux kernel live patching and extended support for end-of-life Linux distributions, so you can keep your Linux server and workstation fleet secure and up to date without disruptions or downtime. And this week they're giving you access to their new report, the 2024 Enterprise Linux and Open Source Landscape Report, which features data generated from their massive annual wide-ranging industry survey. The report aims to help organizations shape their Linux, their open source, and also their AI strategies, with 47 pages detailing trends, forecasts, security insights, and much more. The report covers how modern organizations are behaving in regards to Linux distribution usage, AI strategies, ARM server adoption, security patching, and much more. So you can just click the link to get that free report, and you don't even need to give out your email address or any other personal detail to download it. So let's begin with the Snap Store. Alan Pope, formerly of the Canonical Snapcraft team, wrote a very detailed analysis of what happened recently on the Snap Store, where an app masquerading as a popular crypto wallet was able to be published and to steal about $500,000 in Bitcoin from at least one reported user. It is not the first time a malicious app made its way onto the Snap Store, and generally there was basically no response apart from quarantining the affected snap. So what happened this time was that an app called Exodus was published in early February on the Snap Store. The listing looked legitimate, using the official logo, organization name, some marketing text that felt legit, and the Snap package was listed as safe, meaning it did use the Snap sandbox. Unfortunately, this package was not official, and it was just a scam. Alan Pope conducted an investigation on the package itself, first finding that the Snap was never even mentioned on the website for the official Exodus wallet. They do have a deb or an archive for Linux, but no mention of the Snap. Now this in itself is not necessarily a red flag. Some developers just like to try out a Snap package or a Flatpak, but don't list them on their websites until they've actually reached feature parity and had enough testing. But there are other differences. First, the official app uses Electron, the scam app uses Flutter. But the real indication that this was a scam is that the first thing that is asked of the user in the scam app is to enter their 12 words passphrase to recover their wallet. This is something that you should never do. Even the official Exodus website tells you that they will never ask you for that recovery passphrase. Looking deeper, Alan found that the app would very likely use that passphrase to access the wallet and then use an API to empty it. The app has since been quarantined by Canonical, of course, and it shouldn't be visible anymore on the Snap Store. The issue here is, how did this app make it through the Snap Store validation process? And the answer is, it was really easy. All the scammers needed was a Snap Store account, easy to create, and then they could just register the name of the app and publish it. Since they used the sandbox, there was no human validation involved, as the package was just published as is. Mark Shuttleworth, founder of Canonical, has since then said that while he agrees that cryptocurrencies are, and I quote, largely a cesspit of ignoble intentions, end quote, they don't want to ban crypto apps from the Snap Store, because if they did, people would download them from less reputable or trustworthy sources that wouldn't be sandboxed. And of course, in the Exodus scam wallet story, the sandbox just did not amount to anything, because the app did not need to bypass it to actually harm people. Mark also started a new thread to discuss adding stronger identity verification for all Snap publishers. One proposition is to require a credit card to publish a Snap on the Snap Store, and then use industry standard technology to verify that the person publishing the app is truly who they say they are. Now, of course, you could steal a credit card, so he's also mentioning the possibility of charging a fee and waiting a few months to see if it goes through or if it's revoked. But this would add, as he points out, a long delay for publishing an app, and he also says he does not want to charge for publication on the Snap Store. What is important is that Canonical wants to tackle that problem, and they're asking for feedback on how to handle this issue. And also to fix the problem of these malicious snaps having been installed by people, even though they're quarantined, they're still on a bunch of computers. So now Canonical seems to be pushing completely empty snap packages to erase the malicious snaps to make sure that no one who might not have heard about this story would still be using that snap. They won't be able to. And this is obviously going to be a very important issue to solve, whether it's on FlatHub or on the Snap Store. We do want people to be able to download free apps, we do want developers to be able to publish their apps for free, but also we don't want these apps to be fully malicious, and if you're not asking for any money, you have a hard time implementing the human validation that would help detect these scams. And snaps or flatpaks are absolutely critical to the success of the Linux desktop. Without them, we have absolutely no chance of ever having a centralized distribution platform, which is absolutely needed for third-party developers to actually get invested in Linux. So I really hope we can fix these issues. Now, you might have heard about Warp. It's a juiced-up terminal app that supports hardware acceleration, collaborative work, and features you would often find in an IDE, like multiple cursors, auto-completion, syntax highlighting, and more. It was previously only available from macOS, but they just introduced a Linux version available as a deb or an app image. It comes with all the features that the app has on macOS, as it apparently shares 98% of the code base, but it also comes with better performance on Linux than in macOS, as they have applied a few Linux-specific optimizations. The terminal is built using Rust, and interestingly, it also uses Cosmic Text, which is a library developed by System76 for their Cosmic desktop. Now, do note that the app isn't open source yet. Developers apparently have plans to open source bits of the app, maybe the entire client, but their server component will stay closed source. Because yes, there is a server component. You need to log in to a free or paid account to use the app, which will probably deter a few of you. Their privacy policy seems okay, but who knows. And if you're a fan of AI, which personally I'm not, Warp also supports that, to generate commands from normal text, as in, you could ask the terminal in plain text to help you install Audacity, or to compile a program in a specific directory, and it will try to generate a command to do that. Now, it does look like a very powerful app, especially if you do development work. Now, whether you like the non-open source nature of it, its AI integrations, the need to use an account with it, that's up to you, but it's always good to have some relatively popular apps coming to Linux, even though I would have preferred if it had been open source. Now, if you enjoy RGB everywhere, you will be happy to know that Linux might gain a dedicated API to handle all of that. It's being worked on by Tuxedo Computers, which, full disclosure, they are a regular sponsor of the channel, but they did not ask me to mention this specific piece of news. I didn't even learn about it from them. So their engineer has been talking with kernel developers and with the open RGB maintainers to work on a dedicated kernel interface to handle all of the complex RGB devices and interactions that computers unfortunately tend to come with these days. Now, of course, it's not out of the goodness of their heart. They probably hope to make it simpler for them to handle all the RGB backlight on the keyboards, the light bars, and basically just all the RGB that they ship on their own devices. But at least it will make things better for everyone in the process. The discussion is still ongoing, but it looks like the proposal is well received. And it would indeed be very nice to have a unified interface to handle all of this. It's one more barrier lifted from people who really like their tacky lights to move on to Linux. Now, personally, I absolutely despise RGB. I think it's a waste of battery life, it's a waste of power, and it doesn't even look good. But if people like it, at least they'll be able to use it. It looks like the Cosmic desktop will not be limited to Pop OS, as there is already a proposition to make a Fedora spin using it. They're currently evaluating creating a Fedora special interest group to create desktop images using that specific desktop environment. So this group would handle creating the RPM packages for Cosmic, they would handle promotion for the Fedora spin, but they would also contribute to the desktop itself, contribute to upstream. And they would create an Atomic variant, Atomic being the umbrella under which Fedora publishes their immutable distros. Now, with the alpha for Cosmic probably coming in early March, and the first stable version being planned for PopOS 24.04, so before the end of this year, it is not too far-fetched to see a Fedora spin coming either in October or in early 2025. And it's really cool to see that there's interest for Cosmic outside of just PopOS, because you might have the best desktop environment in the world. If no app uses its features, they're completely useless. So the more contributors they have, the more distros ship that desktop, the more chances we have to have a solid app ecosystem that takes advantage of Cosmic. So, good. Now there is another hackfest planned to keep the momentum going on the work being done on HDR support, on color management, and on variable refresh rate. Igalia will host this year's hackfest in Spain in May, in the hope of making sure that things go smoothly for all of these cool developments. Igalia also already worked with AMD and Valve to implement all of that on the Steam Deck, so I think they're perfectly placed to host this and to coordinate efforts. So we only have one set of protocols that everyone can implement, because GNOME already started working on HDR and variable refresh rate. KDE already has some implementations of that as well. So hopefully everyone can land on a single implementation by pooling all their work. And I really love seeing these kind of concerted efforts. Everybody's just picking one topic and working hard together to fix it and implement it in a way that works for virtually everyone. I hope we'll see these kinds of concerted efforts in the future on more topics than just HDR, variable refresh rate, and column management, because it's exactly the spirit of Linux and the open source community. Now, we also got the release of Firefox 1.23 this week, which seems to be feature-packed this time around. The built-in translation feature can now translate titles in the tooltips of tabs, and it can also translate any text in control fields, in search boxes, and in other various controls that appear on the translated website. You can also now pick what the unified search bar suggests when you use it to search for something. You can disable or enable your browsing history, your bookmarks, your open tabs, or your search engines, so you don't get a bunch of recommendations in there that you just don't care about. Firefox also now better supports controllers by adopting EVDev, meaning that, for example, if you stream games from a game streaming service, your controller experience should be much improved, especially with DualShock 4 and Xbox 360 and Xbox One controllers. Now, there were also a few visual bugs fixed for Ubuntu users, something just didn't have enough contrast or didn't look right, but also using Firefox on ARM devices will now let you play 2K and 4K content on YouTube, provided your hardware can decode that, obviously. And finally, Firefox implements a bunch of other underlying things in their engine, which should make it easier for developers to actually support modern web features and for Firefox to be able to render them well. And it is really cool to see Firefox going back to adding interesting features and upgrading the engine inside of Firefox. It feels like they haven't done that for a long while. I can't attribute this version to the new management at Mozilla, because probably these features were in development way before Laura Chambers arrived as the new CEO, but it's good to see that renewed focus anyway. And let's finish this with the gaming news. There's some progress on the proposed NTSync driver for the Linux kernel. This thing aims to implement a better way to use the Windows NT synchronization when running Windows games through Proton or Wine. And it received its version 2 to try and fix what didn't work well and also to have better documentation. And this patch set is nothing to scoff at. Compared to regular Wine, it brings huge FPS improvements for a lot of games, from 21% in Metro 2033 up to 678% in Dirt 3, 196% in Resident Evil 2, or 34% in Total War Troy. These are massive gains, and we can only hope that this patch set is reviewed and accepted in the kernel, so we can all benefit from some pretty massive performance boosts. At that point, if the project was rejected on the basis of its code or its architecture, Sure, why not? But if it's rejected because it's an implementation of a Windows way of doing things as an optional driver, I would be very disappointed. I know we could always build gaming-specific kernels that implement this patch set, but having this in the upstream kernel would probably be better for most people. Now, it looks like the latest Nouveau drivers and NVK are considered solid enough nowadays, as in the new release of Mesa version 24.1, the developers want to push using Zinc and NVK instead of the native OpenGL drivers that Nouveau provides. Now, if you don't know, Zinc is a little layer that lets you run OpenGL apps using the Vulkan drivers instead. And the fact that Mesa is planning to replace that native OpenGL driver with Zinc is a good indication that NVK is in a very good place. Now, there's also, of course, an environment parameter to decide to use Zinc or not, which means that you can still have control over that if you need to. And that makes me pretty excited because it's a very good indication that NVK is in a really solid place right now, so I cannot wait to give it a shot on my Nvidia GPU and see how well this goes and the performance difference with the proprietary Nvidia drivers. Speaking of which, we just got the release of the stable version of the Nvidia 550 branch, with improved Vulkan extension support for various color formats, HDR improvements, but also fixes for Wayland on older Nvidia GPUs, notably for the GTX 10 series, where there was a problem where Wayland could run basically at 1 FPS all the time, which is no longer the case. There's also a fix for variable refresh rate not working well, and a lot more, including some game-specific fixes. It should be a very interesting update for most Nvidia users on Linux, especially if you had an older GPU and you couldn't use Wayland because it just didn't run well. I think these new drivers might be interesting to test out. Maybe it fixes the problem for you. And we also got the release of the first public beta for Proton 9.0. It's obviously based on Wine 9.0, and it also bundles the latest VK-D3D Proton, the latest DXVK, DXVK NV API, and all other underlying libraries that let you play games on Linux. And it makes a bunch of games officially playable, including games that were already available in Proton Experimental, like the incredible Lord of the Rings Golem. And I mean incredible in all the worst ways. Video playback in games should now be more reliable as well, input devices that have more than 8 axes should behave better, and disk space should be lowered a little bit. Now, don't expect major performance improvements or anything, it's mostly an update to the Wine 9.0 version, and it's mostly game-specific fixes, which in itself is a pretty strong indication that Proton already works very reliably for most things. If we're at the point where we need to implement game-specific fixes instead of wide-ranging bug fixes for most of our systems, then I think we're in a good place. And speaking of a good place to buy a Linux device is our sponsor, Tuxedo. Tuxedo Computers makes laptops, desktops, and NUCs that run Linux out of the box. All the components inside have been picked specifically because they run well with Linux. And in their testing, they actually submit patches upstream and publish all their drivers in open source format so everyone can benefit. They are based in Germany, but they ship to most countries in the world. And they have a wide range of devices that should fit every price point and every need. Whether you need a small laptop for office work, all the way up to a giant gaming tower or a giant workstation for 3D rendering, they have it all. All the devices are very customizable, especially on the laptops, where you can have your own logo engraved on the lid, you can have your own custom keyboard layout, you can open the laptop, repair it, and upgrade it. So all I use these days are Tuxedo Computers devices. I run this whole channel on a Tuxedo InfinityBook Pro 16, and I do all my gaming on a Tuxedo Cube, which I turned into my SteamOS console. So if you need a new computer, you want to run Linux on it, and you actually want to support a company that actively supports Linux, click the link in the description below and get yourself a device from Tuxedo. They're really, really good. So, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. There's the like button, subscribe button, bell, notification icon, whatever, and the comment section. And if you really enjoyed the channel, I left plenty of links so you can support it. They're all in the description as well. So thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!